In this video, I want to discuss why stretching a tight muscle might not be the best solution. Let me give you an example to make it a little bit easier to understand. So how many of you have performed a lower extremity assessment and within that assessment included an active straight leg raise? And during that active straight leg raise, what do you typically see? Do you usually see one leg that's tighter than the other? And if so, what is the reasoning behind it? How do you start to comprehend that limited straight leg raise on one side compared to the other? Well, in this video, I want to continue going down the usual path and what the usual comprehension and thought process is, and then share with you my redefined path in really trying to fix the source or the root cause of that limited straight leg raise instead of just a short-term muscle stretch. So I already blew what the usual thought process is, and that is stretching, right? Typically, when a therapist or a coach is met with a limited test on a table, it's usually chalked up to that muscle's weak, and in this example, the hamstring. And then to solve that, I'm going to stretch it. And then the usual thought process is let's throw a band around the foot, pull the foot up into a straight leg raise and stretch it. We can manually stretch it as the therapist or coach. We can do standing stretches. But again, the bottom line is a lot of times we see the problem of a tight muscle and the solution as a stretch. Now, what I want you to start to do is to redefine that thought process a little bit and ask yourself, is that really how we fix the source of the problem? Why is this patient in front of me showing this limited straight leg raise? So when you start to redefine your thought process, the first question isn't, is that muscle tight? The first question is that muscle in a position that's causing it to be tight? Here's what I mean. The pelvis position is always going to dictate how the muscle responds. And I want to give you an easy analogy and example, and I encourage you to use it with your patients to help them understand this thought process. So what we can do is if I turn to the side, if I turn to the right, this would represent my pelvis biased toward a right-sided position. Now, I am exaggerating for the video's demonstration, but the point is, if we're turned to the right and I do a straight leg raise, what happens? So if I stay here, I go up on the right, I get to there. If I stay in the right hip, if I go up on the left, I get there. So you can see how the left is limited, the right has more range of motion. So in other words, the left is tight. Well, now if I do the same thing, if I turn to the left, representing a pelvis that is more turned to the left. If I then stay there, if I come up on the left, I now have that range, compared to staying on the left, going up, I have that range. So as you can see, when I shift to the left is now normal or has more range, and the right would be labeled as tight. So you see, just labeling a muscle tight is really premature if we don't understand the position of the pelvis. Now, if you want to think biomechanics, if we think about a pelvis that is oriented to the right, then we would expect to see a tighter left hamstring and a normal right hamstring. Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but the two main ones is that when we're in a position of a right turn of the pelvis, we're going to pick up internal rotation. And when we do a straight leg raise, there's going to be slack given at the iliofemoral ligament. This is really going to be a big time player that's going to allow more range of motion. The other is the position. When we're in a right turn, the left is coming forward and the right is coming back. Just based off their starting position, the one that's forward is going to run out of room quicker compared to the one that is back. So you see, if we just resort to stretching in this position, we actually get our patients stronger in a dysfunctional pattern. They will improve mobility to stay here. And then they start to continue to drive more and more into that pattern, and it makes it really hard for them to reciprocate, aka rotate, with activities such as walking or anything in the gym. So then the redefined thought process would be to analyze the problem and solution. The problem is not necessarily the tightness of a muscle. The problem is the position of the pelvis. So you see, we have a totally different problem, and now the solution is going to be totally different. The problem of the turning pelvis turns to a solution of repositioning the pelvis. And again, the nice thing is when you reposition a pelvis more towards this way, you're going to pick up length on the leg that's tight. So you get a really good stretch even though you're not stretching. And this is because the muscles are following the pelvis. When the pelvis starts to change position, the muscles are going to change length. And so based off the problem and the solution that we talked about, the exercise selection becomes really clear. And the intent of this video is to get you to really understand the how and the why behind one leg being tighter than the other. I'm about to show you one exercise you can do, but if you really want to dive deeper and see more exercises and more principles, then I would encourage you to check out our Performance Redefined course. I will leave that in the link below. Now, back to our problem and solution. We said the problem was what? The pelvis being turned, we're going to say in this example, to the right. The solution is that we need to work on hip shifting. So a split stance deadlift is a really great exercise to start to reposition and reorient the pelvis. But do you see how understanding the why and the how of our active straight leg raise, how intentional and purposeful a split stance deadlift becomes? It's not just a random exercise that we're putting in for our patient to burn their glutes and hamstrings. It's an exercise that's going to change the range of motion on the pelvis. It's going to increase the hamstring length, and it's going to provide more movement variability for our patient. So it's a totally different mindset, and you get much better results. So when it comes to a split stance deadlift, you can grab a weight. You don't need a weight. I'll use it for this demonstrative purpose. We're going to be in a split stance position. Now, we want to orient the pelvis to the left. So the right leg is going to be set up in front. The left leg is going to be back. If you have a patient that really struggles at getting into a hinge, you can go into a toes elevated position with a slant board. But all we're thinking here is that we are reaching toward the big toe on the left side. The left arm's going to go back, and the right knee drives forward. And these actions are going to start to turn the pelvis. So as we go down, we're reaching back, we're pushing the hip back until I feel a left glute and a left hamstring, and then I'm coming back up. And you can see every time that we do this, we are turning that pelvis. And the more we can continue to turn that pelvis, the more we're going to see an active straight leg raise improve. And so after you do your reps, that's the next thing we need to go back and do. We need to check the active straight leg raise. If it improved and the left is now magically not tight, that means that we have turned the pelvis more back to a neutral position. And then we're getting normal active straight leg raise measurements, and you know that you have selected the appropriate exercise for your patient.